I will be the first presenter in this session. Again, I'm Dr. Adrianne Tossas. I work at Bird Caribbean and at the University of Puerto Rico in Aguadilla. The topic of my presentation is assessing bird populations while providing research experiences to undergraduate students in Guajataca State Forest, Puerto Rico. Bird populations are affected by natural events. This has been shown before when hurricanes have passed through the region, particularly by the work done by Wonderly after the Hurricane Hugo in 1989. We know that the effects of hurricanes can be long-lasting. We know that they have direct effects and also indirect effects to bird populations, but also there are different all kinds of natural events that can be affecting, like droughts and different changes in patterns of rainfall. These have been also shown in the dry forests in the southern forests of Puerto Rico, like the work done by John Fauberge in 1982 and 1984, showing that that significant droughts have long-term effects. So I am working with students at the university doing point counts in the northwestern part of the island, and I wanted to know how the birds are affected through a long time period, even when there were no natural events going on, but it's important to know what is the status of endemic bird species. The work that I've been doing is in Guajataca State Forest. As you can see here in the red dot in the northwestern part of the island, the Guajataca State Forest is typical of the subtropical humid coastal forest. It lies in the north coast limestone soils. This is a small forest of 927 hectares, 150 to 300 meters above sea level. We have recorded 36 bird species, and 12 of the island's 17 endemics. As you can see in these pictures, normally the forest, you can see with a closed canopy is a closed forest, and you can see the limestone soils. During this decade-long project, we have done point counts in different trails. I selected a subset of plots of point counts for this analysis. All the point counts that I'm presenting here were done in spring sessions of the different years, from February to March. Almost every year in this decade, starting in 2009, 2010, we had data from 2013, 15, 16, 17, and 19. All point counts consisted of 10-minute counts recording all species heard or seen in an unlimited radius, done in the mornings, and all stations were 200 meters apart. Most of these years didn't occur any natural event that was of significant importance since the beginning of the study in 2009. But as we all know, this Hurricane Maria, which was a Category 4 when it crossed the island, hit hard all the island when it crossed, entering the island from the southeastern coast and crossing diagonally and coming out from the northwestern part of the island, particularly where Guajataca State Forest lies. These are pictures from the study site. We can see in the left, pictures from the years before the hurricane, as seen before, the closed canopy, and you can see a group picture of the students. But right after the hurricane, we can see the strong effects of defoliation, uprootings, falling trees, and tree branches breaking. And one of these pictures shows the same place as before. You can see the drastic effects caused by the hurricane. When I analyzed the data for this decade, starting in 2009, there are small fluctuations in the first 6 years, but nothing that is very impressive. But then we had this change drastically after 2015. We can see a drop in the data in 2016. And this is the year of the hurricane 2017. Well, we know the effects of the hurricane, but I wasn't counting on finding this this decrease in the relative abundance of birds in 2016, which was very evident, but it was caused by a drought. So the forest stayed the same, but we could see an effect dropping in almost 20% the populations of the birds. And the effect of the drought lasted for 2 years. So it was a longer term effect. When I see the data from the 2017 year, when the hurricane passed through the study site, the effect is very different, because instead of seeing a decrease in the relative abundance of birds, I can see a higher number of birds counted. But this is an effect of the loss of canopy. When you're doing point counts, you have not many branches, not many leaves, so you detect more birds, and this is the effect of a hurricane. In these point counts, we found 23 species recorded, 11 of the endemics. When I compare this with the precipitation data, I can see here the bars showing the precipitation in millimeters. This is the drought year, 2015. It was a severe drought with less amount of rainfall than the previous years. And when you see the line of the number of birds recorded, not that year, but the 2 years after the drought, you see drops in the number of birds that were detected. And the number of birds started to increase after the hurricane. I'm sorry, after 2017. But this is the year that the hurricane crossed the island. So here is in the right another graph, but showing the relative abundance of birds compared with the canopy cover. And the blue bars are showing the canopy. The canopy decreased significantly after 2017, and the number of birds increased. But as I said before, the increase is due to the higher detectability. This same effect was found by Wonderly after the Hurricane Hugo in El Yunque forest. When I evaluated the data according to the foraging guilds, I have a red bar separating the first part of the study, the first 6 years, with small fluctuations but no significant changes for insectivorous, frugivorous, nectarivorous, and omnivorous. But I can see here an increase in insectivorous after the hurricane. This foraging guild apparently is the one that benefits more from the restoration of the forest after a hurricane with new leaves, probably more herbivore insects, so insectivores benefit from that. But the only foraging guild that changed significantly was that of the frugivores. This was the birds that changed more drastically. When evaluating the data for species individually, there were some significant difference for some of the species, not for others. For instance, the bananaquit is a very common species and didn't fluctuate much before, after the hurricanes, or before and after the drought. But the Puerto Rican bullfinch, which is an endemic, decreased significantly. The Puerto Rican Vireo decreased significantly, but you can see that after 2 years after the hurricane in 2019, both species are starting to increase again. Other common species in the forest, the Black-whiskered Vireo was affected significantly, but this species has shown to increase also after 2 years after the hurricane. There are some species that have different behaviors. And for instance, the Black-whiskered Vireo, we cannot see much of the species in some years, but this is something that depends on the behavior of the species. The Adelaide Warbler is a species that I need to figure out what happened in a year when we didn't have records. So concluding, there were slight changes among years without major events. there were drastic changes in detections up to 2 years after a severe drought. There were also drastic changes 2 years following a hurricane. These changes were delayed because we could see that they lasted more than a year. And it reflects that these are the indirect effects that natural events can cause, probably changing the microhabitat, the resources that the species need to feed, and other characteristics. But what if we have both of these kind of events going on in a sequence? We saw here a drought followed by a major hurricane. But also, the severity of changes will vary according to species and their foraging preferences. And this was not very common, not very a big problem for common species, but what about rare species? To know what are the long-term effects, we need to continue monitoring. I want to thank my group of students. These students vary every year because I have them participating in this research as part of a course. So I have had more than 100 students passing through this course for the past 10 years. And it has been a great experience to have them participating. They have this experience, and it helps them to learn, to apply for graduate programs and to prepare for their professional career. So mostly of them follow different paths like biomedical sciences, but there are some that are going to graduate school in ecology as well. I have 2 of my undergraduates presenting posters today and tomorrow, so please see their presentations. And I'm here to answer any questions if someone from the audience is interested. Thank you.
Adriana, there are 3 questions. I think we would have time maybe for one, or no? Should we fit one in?
Okay, we can have one.
Great talk, Adriana. Why do you think the Puerto Rican bullfinch was particularly badly affected by the drought?
Probably it's because of the food resources. It's a frugivore, so the drought can cause less fruit available. But we had to keep monitoring. The rainfall patterns was showing a small drought in 2019 also. So we will need 2 or more years to know how is the population, but at least it didn't decrease to a bad level. These species have shown to bounce back. So at least the common species are not doing that bad.